In Module 6, Lesson 14, we're going to summarize the distribution using a box plot. A box plot is a graph that is used to summarize a data distribution. The box plot tells us the spread as well as the center using medians of the data. The typical amount of time it takes for a person in your class to get to school is one data set that could be collected. The amount of time it takes to get to school in the morning varies for each person in your class. So if you go through and you survey your class, you'll be able to use that information to create your own dot plot. In exercises 1 through 4, we're going to use the dot plot from Mr. S's class in the time that it takes for each of them to get to school on one morning. The dot plot, as you can see, has a low value of 5 minutes and a high value of 60 minutes, and it is skewed right because there are several pieces of data that are just kind of hanging out to the right. The first thing we'll do is to put a line in the dot plot that seems to separate the shortest times and the longest times. Then we put another line in the plot that separates those who seem to live really close to school, and one that marks off those who took a long time to get to school. And after that time, your plot should be divided into 4 sections, and you will record the number of times in each of the 4 sections. Remember, when we divided the dot plot, we did it in terms of what seems to separate the shortest times and the longest times. We did not do it mathematically by counting the number of data values. So yours may vary somewhat from this, but it should be divided into 4 sections. The teacher asked the class to make a representation that would summarize the times it took students in Mr. S's class to get to school and how they are spread out. Tim decided to get rid of the dots and just use a picture of the divisions he made of the shortest times and the longest times. He put a box around the 2 middle sections. Tanya thought that was a good idea and made a picture of the way she had divided the times, and these are their pictures. In looking at those pictures, what do they tell you about the length of time it takes the students to get to school? We see that the fastest times were from 3 or 4 minutes at the very lowest to 10 minutes, or around 10 minutes for the longest time. The longest times were 62 minutes, and a bunch of the students took from 10 minutes to 35 or 40 minutes to get to school. It kind of looks like most students live closer to school, or at least got to school in a short amount of time. What don't the pictures tell you about the length of time it takes the students to get to school? They don't tell how many students were in the class, or even how many students were in any of the sections. And how did the 2 pictures compare? Well, they're very similar to each other. Tim had a longer box from 10 to 20 than Tanya did, and Tanya had a shorter section with the group from 10 to 15. Mr. S suggested that to be sure everyone had the same picture, statisticians developed a standard procedure for making the cut marks for the sections. Mr. S wrote the following on the board. To make a box plot, find the median of all of the data, find Q1, which is the median of the bottom half of the data, and Q3, which is the median of the top half of the data. Draw a box that goes from Q1 to Q3, the two middle sections. Draw a line segment connecting the minimum value to the box and one that connects the maximum value to the box. So we're going to use the number line to make a box plot showing this data on the box plot. The 5-number summary, and again, those 5 numbers come from our list. The minimum value is 20. Q1, and that's quartile 1, which you remember is the median of the first half of the data, is 23. The median of the data set is 35. Q3, which is the median of the second half of the data, is 41, and the maximum value is 44. So our completed box plot, you'll notice, has the low value of 20, the high value of 44, the median of 35, and the first quartile of 23, and the third quartile of 41. And this middle half of the data, which you remember is what we calculated in lesson 13, this is called the interquartile range between these two lines. That creates the box of our box and whisker plot, or box plot. And then we have these two whiskers showing the smallest value and the largest value in the data set. In exercises 8 through 11, you could then gather the data from your class to form a human box plot of the number of minutes it takes your class to get to school. You'll find the median, you'll find the maximum and the minimum, Q1 and Q3, and then sketch the box plot for that data set. The focus of this lesson is moving from a plot that shows all of the data values, which was a dot plot, to one that summarizes the data with 5 points, which we call a box plot. You learned how to make a box plot by finding the median of the full set of data, finding Q1, which is the median of the bottom half of the data, and Q3, which is the median of the top half of the data, and then draw a box that goes from Q1 to Q3, which are those two middle sections. Draw a line segment connecting the minimum value of the set to the box and one that connects the maximum value to the box. You also learned some important characteristics of box plots. 1/4 of the data are in each of the sections of the plot, thus the term quartile. And the length of the interval for a section does not indicate either how the data are grouped in that interval or how many values are in the interval. It does neither of those things.